Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our second event of the week, a session with Dr. Matteo Zallio on participatory design.
Before we get started today, we have a few updates to run through. Firstly, there has been a small change in plan, as our first speaker, Zoe Partington, couldn't come on earlier today. However, we have Daniel Domine covering the same topic, social model of disability, at 9 a.m. on Wednesday.
In addition, we have one more speaker joining us on Friday to wrap up the events for the week. Speaking on accessibility and inclusive design, we would have Ian McKinnon on the 11th at 1 p.m.
With the updates out of the way, we would now like to extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Matteo Zallio. He is an inclusive research design research fellow at the University of Cambridge, as well as an award-winning designer, UX researcher, and an adjunct professor. Dr. Matteo is also a UX design researcher at Stanford University's Autonomous Systems Laboratory and the founder of the startup Beyond Design Lab.
As a curious researcher, passionate inventor, and UX design strategist, he has developed an extensive track record in creative thinking to understand and incorporate complex technical requirements into research with the goal to improve people's lives through inclusive futuristic solutions.
So without further ado, we will now hand over to Dr. Matteo to talk to you on the topic of participatory design. Please submit any questions you may have for Dr. Matteo in the chat box below, and we'll get to them at the end. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Deep and Amelia. I'm really happy to join this session today, and thanks for the introduction. So let me just share my screen, and then I'll tell you a bit more about me and about the presentation today. So as you can see, I'm at home. I have some of the paintings that I've made a couple of years ago behind me. And it is a way that I think it's very helpful for people to empower self-expression. And in order to empower self-expression, a lot of times we have to think about other people, other users, the people around us. And this is a matter of inclusive design. And inclusive design, I think it's about designing with people. So I have a background in architecture. I was lucky enough to do some working practice as a consultant, and also then get a scholarship for a PhD in industrial design. And then I moved into research with several postdocs, and I was lucky enough, and I was also, very lucky to do research with different type of people. And what I learned during my life experience is that we need to talk to people a lot in order to understand what are the needs, what are the behavior, what are the attitudes that these people have. And right now, I recently started a position at the University of Cambridge as a Marie Curie Research Fellow, and I'm doing research on inclusive design, in particular on understanding what are the accessibility features to design and to develop accessible environments for everybody. So what I want to share with you today, I'm sorry, I just got a little problem here, as it happens normally with the online presentations. And what I want to talk to you today, it's about some principles of inclusive design that I kind of discovered during my working practice and during a lot of research that I've done, and also through a lot of blogs and articles of colleagues, but also I want to share with you some examples of the projects that I recently did in the last few years. So as you can imagine, inclusive design is a matter of accessibility, because if we cannot make a product or a service that is not accessible for people, then it's very hard that it's going to be successful. It's going to help them to solve their needs. So I just want to share with you this image, because I guess most of us are familiar with the technology, and in particular with smartphones and tablets. And here there are pictures of people who are interacting with the technology, and they seem to be pretty kind of familiar with it. However, in a recent project that I worked on, we discovered that, for example, for people with low digital literacy skills, the first impact with the technology looks like very much the person on the left. So people get kind of stigmatized and discouraged about using new smartphones or new smart home devices, rather than we believe that the impact with the new technology should be, for example, for older people, more like these two guys here on the right. And this is just an example. And I'm thinking about, for example, autonomous cars. There is a lot of research about autonomous cars and how people can access it, how cars are interacting with people. And this is just a new piece of technology that is going to happen sooner or later. And the impact that this is going to have in our lives is disruptive, almost like the smartphones and the tablets had a few years ago, and still is having for people like older people or people with low digital literacy skills. And by talking about accessibility, and this is, I think, a very important criteria to design with an inclusive design mindset, is to, for example, develop solutions like this. So we are pretty familiar with this, right? Which is a button to basically open the doors. And I think it's pretty well known by, of course, people with mobility issues, but also with people with no mobility issues, because I personally love to use this button instead of touching the door, especially now with the problems with COVID, and we are all scared about touching doors and objects. So we might just use our elbow, press the button, and the door opens. But what about if we want to lock the door? And I think this is a very interesting idea of including another button to basically lock the door. So we don't need to take a key or to interact with the door closely, but we can just press a button with our elbow to open the door and press a button to lock the door. I mean, simple and useful. So I believe that good design is inclusive design, and accessibility plays a very important role in it. And right now, I'm just going to list you a couple of keywords that I think are important to remember when we think about and when we design. So accessible design actually in relation to inclusive design helps to expand products' reach, but also it sparks innovation and helps the designers, so us, to take on a position of social responsibility. Because when we do user research, when we perform user research and we understand people's needs and people's behavior, we can really innovate, because we're not just asking, what do you want? We are asking about behavior, about attitudes, about emotions, about feelings. And by building up a scenario, we can innovate and create products that are actually useful. And I'll give you some examples later, but just let me dig more into some of the keywords I was telling to you a few seconds ago. So, well, I think it's important to look for points of exclusion, because if we want to include people, then we need to know and we need to understand what excludes people before. So in particular, when we look for points of exclusion and we use them to brainstorm ideas, we also have a very useful insight to highlight, for example, opportunities to create more accessible solutions. And one thing that I always stress out and I want to emphasize when I mentor students or PhD students or colleagues, is that, well, we need to understand basically, and we need to ask ourselves, and we need to understand the answers to basically 4 main questions. We need to understand why something is happening and something is producing a problem or an issue in the user journey, how this is impacting the user journey, when this is happening, when we open a door, when we get into a home, when we get into a car, when we are texting a message, or when we are using an app, and where, which is the context. And by understanding, for example, simple answers to these questions, we can understand the factors, the exclusion factors, and then we can frame a concept that would include the majority of our users and of our customers if we make design for a business, for a company. The second point is about, sorry, just a little problem with the presentation. I think the computer is getting tired of presenting on Zoom, and I hope you will excuse me, but I might just go like this. So the second aspect is about identifying contextual challenges. So everything is context dependent, and in particular, exclusion is context dependent, because when we ask where, for example, where is much about where the person is interacting. What is the context that the person normally lives into? And so considering the context in which people are interacting with the product or a service, it's really helpful to develop an experience that is accessible and could allow users to come back and reuse our design. And if we can make something, design something that is actually successful, well, and people are coming back, well, we can actually say this was an example of inclusive design that was accessible, that was affordable. Now, if we move to the next key sentence, I think that it's very important to recognize personal biases. And by saying that, I mean that when we involve people in, for example, a co-design session or a design thinking workshop, we want to have a wide variety of people with us. We want to capture insights from different communities throughout the design process. And the design process means to understand user needs, to brainstorm with them solutions, to check the solutions, and to understand if these solutions are working for them. Then, once we have a sort of validation, we can prototype, we can make it, we can go to the market and then test again, usability testing, contextual inquiries, and understand if what we made is actually working well for the community or not. And I also believe that co-design can really help people to unleash their creativity because it allows designers to understand behaviors, attitudes, and needs, but also people to discover what their real needs are. And one aspect that I consider really fundamental is to guarantee equal experiences. What I mean by that? Well, we are pretty aware right now of what equality and equity means. But if we think about designing experiences and how to help people to engage in different ways, well, we have to understand that people have different abilities or disabilities. And if we develop, for example, an app that just meets accessibility standards, probably or maybe does not necessarily guarantee usability and accessibility for all, because there might be people with cognitive disabilities, mobility disabilities, but also, for example, several levels of disability. So accessibility standards are very useful, but we need to also look ahead of accessibility standards. We have to know and we have to have the knowledge of them, but we also have to talk to people and experiment and test. And well, when we engage, for example, in a co-design workshop, or when we want to design a new product or a new service, well, we have to engage inclusively. So we might have to try as much as we can to offer people different ways to participate in an experience. So they can discuss, they can share their experience, they can make prototypes, they can co-create. There are different options. And I have to say, internet is a very useful resource to allow you to discover what are the methods, what are the ways we can use to offer this engagement when we design with people. And one thing that is probably very transversal and very common in designing products, in designing graphical user interfaces, in designing services, in designing almost everything, is to extend the solutions. Extend the solutions means that when we design, we need to aim as much as possible. It's a hard job, but we need to at least think about that we can extend our design solution with the aim to satisfy not just one user group, but maybe a wider user group. This means inclusive design. So when we design, we don't need to design for a target user group, but try to embrace a wider user group. Try to find extreme case studies that can really help us to brainstorm a more accessible and affordable solution. So this was the theory. As you know, an academic, I have always to tell you about some theory. But now let's go more into examples, which is the fun part that I like. So before starting, I would just say that inclusion is about creating a better world for everyone. And I mean, I didn't say that. It was a sentence pronounced by Diane Richler. And this helps us to understand something about form, fit, and function. So when we design a product, an object, a pen like this, we have to care about the form factor. So if it doesn't look good, about the fit, so if it does make sense, and about the function, if I can write with this pen, right? So I'll give you a very quick example for each of them. So regarding the form, I mean, look at these two cars. These are two minis, right? One, the left one from the 1975, and the right one from basically last year, 2019. The form factor is so different. They look totally different cars with different size. However, they have the same heritage. They have the same aesthetic criteria. And well, one is much safer and probably goes faster than this one. When we talk about fit, for example, we have to talk about the ability of a part or a feature to mate with, to join another feature, a part of another product or of the same product to match and have a good quality of assembly. So this is an example of a computer, but let's think about a pen. We have to make this pen in a way that these two parts are assembled in the right way without any problem for the usability, for example. And finally, the function. Well, I'll give you an example of this nice dresser for kids where every drawer has a shape of a different clothing that kids have to put in. So basically this helps kids to be more, to tidy up their room in a fun way and an engaging way. So perhaps we're gonna put the socks here, the trousers here, and t-shirts here. And this is a way to make a drawer more fun. And as a summary of this framework, I like this example actually. It's called Butter Better from a Korean designer. And this is an example of form, an engaging form with a knife to spread the butter that is in the container here, but also as a fit because it contains the butter, but also as a sort of aesthetic in it, which is a quite good aesthetic because the shape is actually telling us, hey, I'm a little knife, I can help you spread the butter on your bread. And well, with this in between theory and practice, now we jump into practice. And here I'll show you some of the examples of the research and the work that I've done recently. The first one is about understanding how we can help senior citizens, older people with the technology. The second one is about the concept of a capable microwave oven to augment human capabilities. And the third one is a recent example of a little multi-tool, open source multi-tool that I developed and shared online as a response for the COVID-19. So if we start with the IoT recipes for seniors, well, this was our starting point. So basically, we understood that older adults are using Internet of Things devices. And a lot of people are actually pretty getting familiar with the technology. And here there are some numbers of research of a few years ago that highlights how many people are actually using the technology, and in particular, people over 65. So we also know that there are a lot of IoT devices, a lot of smart devices that we can include in our home to make it smarter. Smart TVs, smart plugs, smart thermostats, little companion robots, robotic vacuum cleaners, and so many other things. So we thought, well, how can we help people to basically connect and use all these devices in a way that could be productive, more efficient, and more affordable and accessible? So basically, we saw that there was actually a nice tool called IFTDT, if this then that helps people to connect, for example, their phone with an app, with a smart device, but not just with one, with many. So with this app, you can actually create sequences and recipes that are called exactly recipes from IFTDT that helps people to connect a lot of devices together and build up sequences of automatized workflows to help people live an easier daily routine, have an easier daily routine. And for example, well, we wanted to understand more. So the best thing to do was to engage with people, was to include them into the design process, and was to basically understand what were their needs and co-create with them. So we had the opportunity to engage with some assistive technology stakeholders, and we were able, again, to brainstorm ideas. That's the most important part, is understand their needs and brainstorm ideas. And long story short for the time, but please ask me any question or just email me or reach me out on social if you have any other questions. Well, here, just to show you, we developed then a concept of applets for senior in order to help them to complete some daily activities of daily living in a easier way by using the technology. And with this co-design session, we were able to create almost 35 sample applets that would connect, for example, a device with another device that would help people to have a better life experience. For example, if the weather station would say that it's rainy, then your voice speaker is going to tell you, hey, John, take an umbrella today before you're going out to buy the bread. So this was actually a nice example of how people can suggest us what are their needs, what are their challenges in the daily life. And this actually helps us to develop an idea to empower people, to increase technological literacy, and to improve also in the future wellness and the sense of security. By moving on to the next project, I'm going to talk to you about the capable microwave oven to augment human capabilities. So the challenge was actually quite simple, because we had the opportunity to collaborate with a team of researchers from Technological University Dublin, sorry, in particular with Dr. Damon Barry and Dr. John McGrory, in developing a solution that would help people from a community in Dublin to autonomously prepare meals. So a lot of these people had some cognitive issues, and for them it was not easy to interact with the microwave. So we came out with a co-design session, with a design thinking workshop that was actually enabling us to understand what were the user needs. And with some brainstorm activity with caregivers and doctors, and of course, the main users, we were able to create a prototype of a capable microwave oven that can provide assistance by adaptively support user interaction. How it works? Well, it's pretty simple. When a person, this is just a workflow that we developed to explain how the microwave oven works. And when a person goes in front of the microwave, we have a barcode scanner. The barcode scanner can read the barcode, for example, of a prepared meal, such as rice and bean, or a chicken tikka masala, or anything that is actually a prepared meal that you can buy from the supermarket. And by the way, these users were actually very keen on going to the supermarket and buying food for themselves with the help of a caregiver. And once they got back to the community, they needed to heat with the microwave. And by using this microwave and scanning the barcode, the microwave was actually understanding what type of food was in the hand of the person, and then was suggesting through a learning process, what were the steps that the user needed to do in order to cook and reheat this prepared meal. So as a feedback, well, we had very good feedback from our sessions and from our usability testing sessions, and we understood that there was a lot more to do, a lot more to implement in order to help these people to autonomously sorry, prepare their meal. And as a last example of understanding what is the context and understanding the issues that might happen to people around us, I want to talk to you about this little project that was that I have done back in April during the pandemic. And Handy was born as an open source response against the crisis of COVID-19. And one day I went to the post office and I got the chance to then sit in my car and observe people for about 1.5 hours. And I took a lot of pictures, and this was one of the pictures. And I saw that basically the vast majority of people getting into the post office were scared of touching the handle. were scared of touching the door. And look at this person, he's wearing a mask, he's wearing gloves, and he has the napkins, and he's very afraid of touching the door because of COVID. And, you know, back in March and April, this was a pretty bad issue. And at the time I was in the United States, and it was just the start of the pandemic. So I decided then to create an open source solution, unfortunately just by observing people, because I didn't have chances to interact with them and ask about problems and needs. But I just then came home, I developed a little mock-up with cardboard, then I made a 3D model, and I was able to 3D print with an online 3D printing service. And this little device, Handy, is a little tool that we can use to basically open doors and interact with a lot of other objects in the public space. And let me just give you some example. We can, for example, open pull door handles or just push doors. So we can pull or push door handles. We can push buttons and switches. We can open the car door, but also we can interact with different keyboards, and is a symmetric form factor that allows to have more grip and less force using our wrist, helps us also, for example, to grab bags like in this picture. And as features, then I thought, well, we need to make simple things sometimes, because simple things, and in this case also open source, might really help people to solve an issue that is happening in the immediate time. And we need also to think about, for example, the life cycle assessment. If we're going to make this device, how can we make it recyclable and reusable, or how our solution is impacting in creating a more sustainable environment. Rather than using gloves and napkins, maybe we use only one of these devices for all our day, and then after the pandemic, hopefully when a day will be gone, we can recycle it and then reintroduce the material to the process. So as feedback, I got a lot of emails, I got a lot of contacts, I got a lot of people interested in buying it, and I got thousands of downloads of this little device. And these are some of the feedback that I got. And one thing that actually occurred to me and was really important was to find out that people with some mobility disability, so a mobility scooter user, was particularly bothered with doors to stores and commercial buildings. And then that don't have power assist. And so this guy, Jerry, asked me that we would love to have Andy for dealing with these doors, because he thought it was really not just a good solution for the COVID, but also a good solution to enable him to interact with doors that have no power assist. So I think that today I show you just the tip of the iceberg. We can do so much with so little. And I always enjoy reading and remembering to myself and to others this sentence, which is good design enables and bad design disables. And I really appreciate your attention today. I'm sorry that we couldn't have any question during my presentation, but please, now I guess we have a couple of minutes. Ask me any kind of question you want to know. Here are some useful links for some further information you would like to read about, and reach me out if you have any questions. And thank you so much for your attention. I hope we can design some better tool and some better device for a more inclusive world. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your presentation. We will now be taking questions if any of the participants have for Dr. Matteo. So please send them in the chat function below, and we'll have them online. Okay, so we've got a first question from Yanning. Have you ever done any projects that design for neurodiversity?
The design, sorry, for?
Neurodiversity.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's, thanks for the question. Daniel, correct? Was Daniel that asked me the question?
Yanning, sorry. Yanning.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Yanni, for the question. The answer is actually not deeply. So no, I would love to get engaged into a project like that, because I think that that's an aspect of abilities and disabilities of people that actually impacts a lot in the quality of life. So I think, I mean, if there is anybody who's working on that and would like to just brainstorm some idea, I'm happy to do it and to get involved.
Okay, thank you for that. One more of our participants had a question. How can a design be specific enough to be helpful to a certain set of people, but also inclusive enough to the wider majority so that it benefits society on a greater scale?
Well, another great question and very hard to answer, because well, there is no right answer, right? And there is no correct answer. What I could say is that think about designing with criteria that are flexibility and accessibility. And right now we are in a world where everybody needs to have a unique piece of design. Everybody needs to have his own style. Everybody needs to have something that is unique and that we can customize, and kind of we can almost make the design of our computer with stickers and with different softwares, or the user interface of our phone with different apps and different services in a way that is customized. And almost like a tailor would make a suit or a dress for a person. So I think that nowadays, in order to address this important issue, we need to design with a mindset that is oriented to flexibility and adaptability. And flexibility, I say, for example, think about a smartphone, okay? Everybody, or at least a lot of people in the world, have a smartphone, okay? The smartphone is the same piece of technology for everybody. An iPhone 10 is equal to an Android or a Samsung, right? However, I would say almost everybody in the world would have different apps, a different number of apps, or a different number of features in their phone, because it's highly customizable, highly personalizable. So you might need to have Google Maps and other 10 apps, but I might not need Google Maps and other 10 apps that you have. So I think that's an example of how we can design in a way that is that our product or service is flexible enough for people to customize according to their needs.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome, thanks.
Thank you. I think we'll finish up the Q&A there, but I'm sure if anyone else does have any further questions, you can send them over after the video. We'd like to say a huge thank you to Dr. Matteo for the great insight into participatory design. It was really great to learn about the theory with a fantastic breakdown of the key steps for the making design process inclusive. I know that I will take the points you raised, for example, the 3F framework, and use that when I'm thinking about design in the future, and I'm sure the participants will think about it too, and try and hopefully apply that in their projects.
Yeah, we feel that this was the perfect fit for the aim of the hackathon, and a great insight into the various technologies such as Internet of Things and if this then that and applets, which are directly applicable to the participants. The example of the capable microwave was helpful in giving practical insight as to how they can approach the issue. So thank you, Dr. Matteo, and thank you to all the participants for joining in. We would like to remind you of the quote in Dr. Matteo's presentation: inclusion is about creating a better world for everyone. So please keep up the hard work on your projects and ideas for creating a better world through inclusive design. And that's all for today. However, we do have our next event tomorrow at 9 a.m. with Daniel on the social model of disability. So see you then.